Good morning. I was on the tread desk and thinking about what I was going to serve for dinner tonight, thinking about my day ahead, and I didn't want to break it up by leaving this morning to go grocery shopping. So I started to think through what's in my pantry and my freezer and my fridge, which we are low on groceries because I've been gone for so long. But I came up with something. So I decided that I would go for a chicken pot pie because I do have chicken, onion, celery, carrots, and the only obstacle was the chicken is whole and frozen. So I had that in our freezer. So I decided that I could run it under cold water to loosen it from the bag that it's frozen in, and I can cook it in my Instant Pot so I can get the meat off the chicken to be able to make the chicken pot pie with. And since I have the day, at least the morning here at home, I can get the chicken off the bone and make gravy. I think the Instant Pot is going to make it possible for me to do everything I need to do for creating a chicken pot pie, or chicken and biscuits, which is probably the more likely thing. Make the chicken, vegetables, and gravy, and then when that's hot and bubbling in the casserole dish, I can make some homemade biscuits to top it with. I'm leaving my husband and young adult son with dinner tonight while I go meet with some friends, or this afternoon while I go meet with some friends, and I won't be home for dinner. So what I have done is I've gotten the chicken, the whole chicken, which was 4 pounds, out of the freezer bag. Oh, I'm glad I picked it up to show you. Still have some plastic sitting here. That wouldn't have been a huge tragedy if I had cooked it in the Instant Pot with the plastic still on, but except for chemicals, I wouldn't have wanted those, at least into my food. So here's my whole frozen chicken, and so that I don't overcook the bottom of it, I put in the trivet, and there's about 2 cups of water in the bottom of the Instant Pot liner. So that's going to go in. I'll wash my hands. One tip that I found in keeping my Instant Pot rim clean, because food can collect around the inside of the rim over there, which I know you can't see off camera, but one thing I do when I'm loading my Instant Pot liner with food is I don't do it in the Instant Pot. And when I take food out of when I'm serving food out or scooping food out, I take the liner out from the Instant Pot. So this is ready to go in. I'm not even going to season it. I'm just going to get it cooked enough to come off the bone. Okay, so here it goes into the pot, and here's a feature I love about the 8-quart Instant Pot. It's got these tabs on the sides of the handle, one here and one over here. And when I open and close the Instant Pot, I can just rest it in here in the slots. It goes on either side. So if you're right-handed or left-handed, or prefer whichever side, you have that option. Anyway, this is set to close the lid down, turn it to lock it, and then I'm putting it on the sealing option. And you probably won't be able to see me operate this, but I'm using pressure cook, and I'm going to do this for 40 minutes because I'm going for 10 minutes per pound, and I have a 4-pound chicken here. So now this is set to cook in the Instant Pot, it just turned on. It will come to pressure. It will start, once it comes to pressure, the little red, or the pop-up valve that is pushed up by the pressure, that will come up, and it will be pressure cooking for 40 minutes. And then I will leave it in the Instant Pot to natural release. And then when that's done, I'll go ahead and open it and let the chicken cool off to take the meat off the bones. So I've got that part of my dinner started. While it's coming up to pressure and cooking, I'm gonna go back over to my tread desk and keep doing my morning habit of reading and walking and taking care of stuff over in that corner of the house. I'm back in the kitchen, and I walked while this did its pressure cooking thing, and while it did the natural release, so it's gone off, and I'm ready to take a peek and see how it came out. See if it's cooked enough to debone. That's probably gonna be good and hot. Let's see. I'll use another towel. Okay, let's see if I can get this out without hurting myself or ruining it. It looks cooked based upon a split I see in the leg over here in the skin. And one really great way to test your chicken if it's done is to, if you can turn the bone in the socket. That's too hot. Let's use a dish towel. Yeah, it just breaks away freely. Okay, so I am gonna let this sit and cool while I go shower, because this is me kind of right out of bed. I told you before that what I do is I lift the liner out before I take the food out, because I don't like dripping and in the edges here and then having to clean it up. But I didn't do what I said I'd do. So anyway, what I should have done is lifted this out, put it on the counter, then lifted the chicken out so I didn't have any drips in here. But anyway, it is what it is. I do have broth in here from having cooked the chicken. Yeah, you can see that. And what I'll do is, I might as well leave this out. When I come back after showering and dressing, I can start the cooling process by maybe ripping it open a little bit. Never mind. I'll debone the chicken and hold the meat out and put all the bones and skin and carcass stuff back in the liner, and then I'll pressure cook that to get a really good broth for making the gravy part of my chicken and biscuits. So, time to go shower and dress for the day. Okay, showered and dressed and ready to rip apart this chicken and get the meat into the Instant Pot. I realized as I was doing things that I'm actually not going to have time enough to make my bone broth the way I want for the liquid part of the chicken and dumplings, the gravy part. So I went to my freezer and looked for some bags of frozen chicken broth, bone broth that I've made previously from chicken carcasses. So I will be able to thaw those out quickly, run them under water and open them up, and use that for the start of my gravy base. And then these bones, meat bones. Sometimes I don't work well when I try to talk at the same time. So I realized I had to change my game plan. And that's part of being comfortable cooking working in the kitchen is being able to flex and shift gears, substitute when things aren't always available as you had planned. So I'm still going to make bone broth out of this. I will just use it for another recipe, and today, to speed things up, I'll use the previously frozen stuff. That's sitting over there in a kettle. After I get the meat off from here and into the bones in the Instant Pot liner, I can start thawing that bone broth. I'll get it out of the plastic bags using some hot water, and then I'll start thawing it in the kettle slowly and get the gravy part started as well. So we'll see what meat we get off from this bird. This is a job that I don't think anybody likes to do this job. I know I don't. But I pass the time usually not talking to the camera, but listening to podcasts, having an audiobook playing or something like that to distract myself and to use my time wisely, because there's lots to learn in this life, and podcasts and audiobooks are great learning tools. Okay, so hopefully this won't take many more minutes. And I'm showing it all on camera just so you can see, if you've never pulled apart a whole cooked chicken before, what that looks like. I will cut up the pieces of meat later, but for right now I just want to get the meat off the bones and the bones into the Instant Pot. I like to pressure cook that for 4 hours to get my bone broth. And trying to think through. So after I get the meat off the bones pressure cooking, thaw out, get those bags thawed enough to take off the bag and put the frozen chunk of broth into the kettle. Putting in meat when I meant to save meat. Okay, so this is a good hunk of bone here. There's the neck. I'm not going to try to get picky with the meat on the neck. Pulling off fat, skin. There's meat. I also need to get out the carrots and the celery and the onion. Start working with those. This is a chicken wing. A little bit of meat on there. Of course there is, because people eat chicken wings, right? It's one of our favorite Friday night fun food meals. I can set this aside to wash. Okay, so I have to be able to have this main dish prepared by 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I think I can do it. Yeah, it's not a fast meal, but one of the wonderful things about this meal is if you can double it, or if you're a small family like ours, you can turn it into 2 meals and freeze one. So if you double it, you can freeze one. Or if you're a small family, you can make a full chicken and dumpling or chicken and biscuits recipe, but freeze some for another meal. And that is wonderful, to have a meal, a main dish tucked away in your freezer for a busy day when you know you're not going to be home and you can't cook, and you're not a drive-through kind of family, which we never have been. It's not my preference. started out when we were a young family, we just didn't have the budget for it. Even drive-through was kind of a treat. And so we never got in the habit of it. Okay, almost done here. Then I'll wash my hands and get this on to the next step. So let's see here, meat, a little bit more meat right there. Okay, so that is the meat I'm getting from one chicken. Yeah, you can see that. All right, I'm gonna step over here and wash my hands. Okay, I will set the meat aside and bring down the Instant Pot. I have it up here on the breakfast bar. Bring that down. So, set these things aside. All right, there we go with the liner. And do I want to add more? Trying to decide if I want to add more water to that. I think I will. Stick that under the Berkey. Basically, I'm adding enough water to probably cover the bones and stuff in here. So this liner for the 8-quart is, well, it's not half full yet. It's probably more than 1/4 full. It only marks half and 2/3, which 2/3 full is max on here. Okay, lid goes on, lock it down, push it back for sealing. I'm gonna push it back against the counter, out of my way. Actually, to really make it out of my way, no, I'll leave it down here. I could put it up on the breakfast bar, but I'll leave it down here. And now, no, since I am going to, this will just stay, let's see. No, this is just gonna stay and keep warm until I get home tonight, I think. So I am gonna set it up on the breakfast bar and put it out of the way. Okay, pressure cook. And it's easier to dial it down to 0, and then the number that comes up is 4 hours. So that's at 0, and then the next click is for 4 hours. So that is going to pressure cook there for 4 hours. Okay, so the next step is to get these bags of previously made bone broth that I wrote chicken broth on, out of the Ziploc bag. And the way that I do that, I don't know if I can move you around here. I'm not the most slick videographer. Well, I guess you're not gonna see it anyway, but I'm just gonna run it under some water to loosen it a little bit, some hot water. Never mind, that's going to take too long for me to show you and bore you, but you get, I think you get the idea. Well, you don't get the idea because you can't see it, I'm just telling you about it. Wait a minute, no, it is coming, it's coming loose enough. I can move it around. So what I'll do is I'll just do one of them while the other is sitting under the faucet. So my kitchen shears here. Let's go back to this angle over here. See? Yeah. Okay. So kitchen shears, cut off the top, slips out, slicker than snot. Not not a nice thing to associate with cooking, but oh well. And then that can thaw on the stovetop with a little bit of heat applied while I start cutting up the vegetables and also making, turning this into some gravy. Okay, so let's see here. What do I got? Let's take a drink. I have an Instant Pot behind me that is also cooking some hard-boiled eggs because that's what I'm taking with me today when I leave. Okay, I've got the broth is thawing here in the pot. I'm out of the camera, I know. If I hadn't had bone broth in the freezer, this would have been my other backup. This product called Better Than Bouillon. I pick it up at Sprouts, or I've had it at plenty of other grocery stores as well. So Better Than Bouillon, it's a roasted chicken base paste, and I could make broth out of that. So that would have been my next backup option. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna do is get my veggies ready for cooking. And just eyeballing things, which is a lot of the way I mostly cook, is just by feel and sight. I figure that a big onion like this is going to be just about right for that amount of meat and whatever broth I make. And I have this left for celery. It's not a full stalk. I mean a full head of celery. One piece is a stalk, the whole thing is the head. But I think this is about right, so I'll use that. Oh, you know what? Let me show you. Maybe I have celery already cut up in my freezer. Let's go check that. Okay, let's look down here where it keeps some things. Sure enough, there's some cut up frozen celery. Okay. So, here is the frozen celery, and it's definitely time to use it because I've got a lot of water crystals collected on it. But the last time I was cutting up celery, a head of celery, I cut up the whole thing and only used what I needed, and then I froze the rest flat on like a cookie sheet or whatever. Something like this, with maybe parchment paper on it. So I would cut up all the celery, use what I needed fresh, and then I could freeze the rest if I want. The advantage of having this in my freezer makes it quick. I can just use this in my chicken and biscuits recipe. I think this is about the right quantity. It looks maybe it could be about 2.5 cups or so. So I'll use that, which means that I will still be able to have some fresh celery to use in my fridge. So the next thing to do is figure out my carrots, how many carrots I want to use. So I'll open the bag here. And I'm thinking for this quantity of meat, maybe something like this many carrots. Just guessing. I'll know more when I cut the carrots up. I am not going to peel them. I'm just going to wash them and cut off the ends and then cut them up into chunks. So let's, I'll get started on that. There's 2 reasons not to peel the carrots. One, it saves time, and they don't need to be peeled because they don't have to be pretty. And the other reason to not cut up the carrots is for the nutrition. I don't want to cut away that peel and lose that nutrition. So I'm going to chunk up my my carrots. I don't really like to do small slices. I'm doing more sort of rustic chunks. And so I'll just do that with all the carrots and have a pile of carrots to cook once the broth gets going. This is almost fully, it's fully dissolved. Not just, yeah, just thawed, fully thawed. One little piece of frozen broth floating around in there. But now I can start using this to throw the vegetables in and they can start cooking. And by putting them in, I get to see my ratios. And if I don't have enough broth to work with, that's where the chicken base can come in. So if I don't end up using all of these carrots, I can just nosh on them and eat them. I enjoy the crunch, the sweetness, so they may become part of my meal today. I don't want this, this needs to be more dense with vegetables than a soup would be, but I definitely want there to be enough broth when I put on the biscuits, because those biscuits are also going to absorb some of the broth. So I want this to have kind of creamy, not too much liquid, not too little. I don't think that's quite enough carrots. So one more big carrot and then I'll probably be eating those 3. Or they can just go back in the bag if they have to. So on a carrot where the top is thicker, I can cut part way down. And these make nice chunks here, but as I get up through, I've already split this halfway down, so now these pieces here are about the same size as these pieces here. Alright, so I think that's going to be enough carrot for there, and now that I have this done, these frozen pieces of celery, that can go in. I've used this bag for a while, so I think that, well, it may be good for one more use. I can throw that back in my freezer. Sometimes I have a lot of celery that I cut up at once if I buy 2 or 3 heads of celery at a time. Okay, so next is the onion. Let's, actually, I'm going to maybe pull out some smaller onions that need to be used up even before this one, because this still feels good and healthy. Well, I said I have been away from home for a while, and that while has been long enough for my onions in my onion bowl to almost rot. I'm going to see if I can save any of this. So I pulled out the worst of them, and I will cut them up and see if I can save any. This one's pretty bad, and I'm not sure it's worth saving, but it's not worth throwing money down the drain either. So I got some there out of that one. I know it's easy just to toss things, but tossing money down the drain isn't what I aspire to do as a homemaker. So save that one. This one, I know, it is not worth saving. It's just really pathetic. So I missed out on that one. This one feels like it has some soft spots, but we'll see what we can salvage here. Looks like only half of it might be, oh, but see, I can get a good decent chunk out of that. Let's rinse this off. Okay, I've got more. There's a little yellow, so I'll cut that off. Oops, that's paper. Okay, so I'll just keep cutting through these and see if I can salvage enough to get the amount of onion that I want for this recipe. For onions that looked rotten, I got a pretty good salvage out of them, and I think this is about the right amount to put in my pot of soup. So I'll start cutting those up in a moment. Stir my pot. You know, I was wondering if I have enough carrots in here, but I'm not sure I do, so I may add one more. I have one more of the carrots left, so I left over there, so I'll add that in. It's not too late to get it going. Adding it to the pot. It's not too far, what I mean is it's not too far behind the other carrots that I already added in. So I can get this thrown in. While I've been thinking about what's going in this pot, I've also realized I probably will add some frozen peas if I have those in the freezer in the laundry room. So I'm not going to cut up all of these onions in front of you. I'm just showing you how I cut up an onion. I'm doing these a little bit bigger pieces than I normally do. If I were making a salad where people were going to be eating raw onion, I would do it really, really tiny. But these are more medium pieces. Let me just do an example of some tiny, tiny pieces. Just having the nice knife cut closer together, so very thin slices. That just gives smaller pieces. So this would work well if I were doing a salad, a raw salad, and maybe I'll set this aside for tonight's salad, because I think that's what I'm going to leave for the guys, is the chicken and biscuits and a green salad. They can have onion in their salad. And this way, they won't be eating huge pieces of raw onion, just nice flavor bursts of raw onion. Okay, so that can go, I'll set that aside for using in tonight's salad. Cooking is improvising, remember that. Cooking is an art. I'm going to get another onion since I reduced the amount of onion I was putting in there. I'll cut that up later, but anyway, I'm going to cut up all this onion and then that's going in the soup pot as well. Okay, move the cutting mat over to here, dump in the soup pot. All right, we have celery, onion, and carrots, sort of the bare minimum of what I would put in a chicken and biscuits type of mixture or a chicken soup. And then when the vegetables are all tender, the last thing I will put in, sorry I'm off camera, I just realized that. So the last thing I will put in, once the vegetables are tender, will be the frozen peas. I'm going to go check and see if I have those. I'm in luck, I have them. So I will put these in the pot frozen, but I will wait until the vegetables are soft, the gravy or the broth part has been thickened, and these will go in frozen the last thing, because the heat that will be there will be enough to cook these, and the more these get cooked, the duller green they get. The advantage of putting peas into this recipe is they add some more color, because we've got white chicken, brown broth, gravy, white onion, dull celery, and orange carrots. So this adds another nice color for the eyes to look at. We eat with our eyes first, and it adds more nutrition. Well, it looks like I'm going to end up using the Better Than Bouillon base after all, because I want to start a gravy or a thickening agent to use with the vegetables and the bone broth that I have in here. So I have a couple of options. I could just do the way that I grew up, which is using butter and flour and some of the broth to start a thickening agent. But I know that flour is just, it's a processed food. It's grain ground up into fine particles, and that breaks down quickly in our bloodstream, and it raises our blood sugar quicker, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try to be a little gentler on my husband's blood sugar with this meal. So I'm going to make this more along the ideas that I have learned from Trim Healthy Mama. So I am going to use the Better Than Bouillon paste to start a gravy, and I'll let you watch it, but I can't share the amounts and all the ingredients I'm using. I'll point you to my resource where I've learned some things. I'm also going to use some butter, but I'm not going to use as much as I would if I were cooking my old Vermont style childhood cooking that I grew up with. I'm going to try to pull back on the fat a little bit, because when we have extra fat on our body, why would we put the extra fat in our mouth? I can get away with making this gravy and reducing my fat in a little bit. As a matter of fact, that's the whole idea behind this gravy recipe that I'm going to point you to. This is the latest of the Trim Healthy Mama cookbooks. This one's called Trim Healthy Future, and it is done by the sister's niece. The sisters are Pearl and Serene. They're the Trim Healthy Mama sisters authors, and they have a niece, Rashida. This is her cookbook, and she has great kitchen skills here. I admire this young woman. But because this is a Trim Healthy Mama cookbook, Pearl and Serene both contributed recipes here. These are Pearl's recipes, and these are Serene's recipes that are found within all these beautiful recipes in this cookbook. A lot of pictures which tend to inspire me. What I am going to look for specifically is Pearl's go-to gravy recipe. I'm not going to follow it exactly, but I'm taking the ideas from it and making it my own. And this go-to gravy recipe is considered a fuel pull, which means it's low in both carbs and fats. So the carbs in a traditional gravy would come from the flour, and the fats in a traditional gravy would come from the butter. But this gravy, found on page 376, does not have either. So Pearl made this up, and it is one of the recipes that are printed in her book. Let's just make sure I can obscure the recipe. And I've made this gravy a number of times and really appreciate that Pearl came up with it and had it printed. So I'll set it over there off site of camera, and I've got to collect a few things and start that. Once I've got them collected, I'll come back and let you watch me put the gravy together. I just read through the recipe and I realized that why would I add any fat at all? Because this is a fuel pull recipe and I don't need the fat in it. So the fat that's going to be in this dish will be coming from the meat in the chicken, that's the dark meat, and from the biscuits that I'm making on top, because the biscuits I don't think I'm willing to try to THMify my biscuits, and I don't think my husband would appreciate it. He likes his biscuits. So anyway, I'm going to put this butter away. Being able to pull back on some fat is better than pulling back on no fat. That's my philosophy. Okay, I've got the dry seasoning and thickening ingredients in here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add the amount of chicken paste base, bouillon base, that I think it's gonna take to give me a good flavor. So that's what I think it will be. I did not add salt to this recipe because this stuff is salty. So you've got to be careful that you hold back on salt when you're using bouillon paste until you figure out what your flavor is. Now, I'm only going to add enough water in here to mix these things thoroughly, because if I dump it all in at once, I'll have a lumpy, bumpy mess. It might look like it's a lumpy, bumpy mess now, but this is how you incorporate liquid into dry ingredients. Well, I'm not used to doing it this way, but I'm trying to let the camera see. So I want to come up with a smooth mixture before I add all the liquid in. So I'm getting everything incorporated, and I have tripled the recipe, Pearl's gravy recipe, that's on page 376 and 377 of the Trim Healthy Future book. I tripled it because, not because I think I need it all for this chicken and biscuits recipe, but because if I'm making it, I might as well make enough so that I have some to use later. Maybe I'll do something else with gravy. Cook once, eat twice, if possible. So this recipe will be a cook once, eat twice, because it definitely won't be more than just my two guys. So I think I've got this mixed in enough now to be able to add all of the water without getting a lumpy, bumpy mess. So that's kind of smoothed out. You know, I'm just going to taste what's on my finger here. It's got a good taste to it. Okay, I think that's going to work well in my recipe, helping me cut back on both carbs and fats. Carbs in the form of finely ground flour. So now I can see I'm still incorporating. I didn't just dump it all in at once. Incorporating my liquid, and I have 6 cups of liquid here. So I get it mixed together evenly, and then I will turn on the heat and start thickening it. Okay. There we go. Let's check the flame on that. All right, you don't need to watch me stand and stir the whole time, but if I were here by myself, I would be listening to a podcast, like I said, or an audiobook. You don't have to just stand here and let your mind wander. So I'm going to turn off the camera for a little bit until this is ready to be added into that. And I'm going to enjoy listening to a podcast. I'm updating you. I moved the gravy pot from the smaller burner to the larger burner to move things along faster, because I need this to cook up quicker, so I'll be ready to go today. And I was able to pull this pot aside. It's done. It doesn't need to simmer anymore. And one of the things I've learned through the years of cooking is that you can feel when your vegetables are softer, because they don't hit against a wooden spoon as hard. So I know that these are soft enough without even taking a bite. So this is just waiting for the gravy to be added, and then I've got my chicken over here that I'll be cutting up in a minute. I've got to keep stirring the gravy, because if you don't stir your gravy, the thickening agents will fall to the bottom of the pan, and they'll thicken down there. So you've got to keep the gravy solution moving. That's all I needed to say about that. Okay, it has reached a gravy consistency. I realize though, and this is where improvising when cooking comes in, that because of the liquid I already have in here with the veggies, that I may not have a thick enough product that I will be happy with. So I'll just keep an eye on things as I start to put them together. If I need to thicken this some more, I have some tips and tricks in my pocket. So what I'm going to do now is, this gravy is done. It's not going to cook it. I don't think it's going to thicken anymore. It had reached a boil. I turned it down. I can show you that it's at a boil. So you can see that the temperature had come up, and that's when your gravy, if you cook it at a boil for a minute or so, you're done. And so we have reached that point. I'm going to set this aside, and the next thing I'm going to do is cut up the meat and put that in here, and then I will add the amount of gravy that I think it needs. Again, cooking by sight. So let's set this aside and get ready to cut up the meat. Okay, pretty sure I'm confident I'm gonna use all of this meat, so that's gonna get dumped onto the cutting mat. And this is probably, well, I'm not sure if it's the pan I'm gonna cook the final recipe in. I'll just set it aside and decide that as I go along. But all I need to do with this meat is get it into more bite-sized pieces. So I'm using a cleaver. I think you can see this, yeah, okay. Keeping my fingers out of the way as I cut down through. So then the next step is the meat will get mixed into the vegetable stuff once these pieces are small enough to satisfy me. There's a little bit that I don't want in my soup. Or in my mixture. It's not a soup, it's a mixture of the gravy and the meat in it, veggies. I will have to season it because right now there's no seasoning in there. So that will come next. Probably I'm going to use a little bit of sage and thyme, maybe some marjoram. Not exactly sure. See what feels right and taste and test as I go along. Okay, so I don't see any huge chunks of chicken that are going to be a problem. So this is ready to go in. Now I did not cook the chicken in the broth for a long time because with experience I've learned that the longer you cook this chicken meat, it's just going to turn into threads instead of chunks of meat. So this is how it's going in now. Let's see here. Just dump this in. This doesn't have much debris on it, so we can go right into the dishwasher. All right, that's taken care of. And I don't know if you had noticed, but I switched from this short spoon to a long spoon when I was stirring because the short spoon, my hand was getting kind of warm, close to the heat, so I switched things up. Okay, so this is good here. I'm definitely going to want to have the gravy aspect in here. because what will happen is when biscuits are put on top of that, say in the casserole, the biscuits suck up a lot of the liquid. But I can also tell, because I'm putting two liquids together, I think I am going to use my little thickening trick. Okay, so before I pour this into the pan to heat up in the oven, oh, I've still got my peas to add. I'm remembering that now. And remember, I'm adding them frozen because I want to keep the color to them. So let me get those. They were sitting in my freezer. Sorry that I'm not on camera all the way. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay, that's probably better. So these have been sitting in my front freezer. I have a freezer in my refrigerator is normal. Then I have a upright freezer in the laundry room that is a wonderful homemaking tool for me because I can buy things on sale and put them by. I can make extra food, like cook once, eat twice, having a meal set by in the freezer if I want. I remember when our third child was born. We had two little girls at the time, 5 and 3. And so then we were having a third child. This baby was coming along, and I knew I was a busy mom, and I was trying to go into a fall of homeschooling for the first year. So I made up a whole bunch of casseroles to get me by. And they did for about 9 months of his life. Okay, I'm going to keep that spoon. So this consistency right now is pretty good, but I'm trying to decide if I want to thicken it more. I think I'm going to dust in some xantham gum. That's kind of the trick I was thinking of. So xantham gum is a nice thickener that doesn't add carbohydrates, and I think it will do the trick. Just if I add I'm starting with a half teaspoon here of xantham gum. You need to dust it in so that it doesn't get lumpy. It's not as quick to clump up as glucomannan is, which is another Trim Healthy Mama trick that I've learned. But I think that will be just the right amount, taking it to the point of thickness that I want. And now it's time to add some seasonings here. So let me get those. Okay, I pulled out my spices. The first thing I'm going to add is some parsley. Now I could use dried parsley, but I like to use fresh. And what I do is I often will buy bunches of parsley and then chop them up and freeze them. So this is going to add another pop of color and contrast to the recipe and wonderful nutrition. So I think that's about right there. Rinse off my hand. And I'm gonna go put this back in the freezer, and then I'll be back to add the other seasonings. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna add is marjoram. Just gonna sprinkle some in. That might be, if I were to measure it, that might be a 1/4 teaspoon, not sure. I don't need to be heavy-handed with it. Now the really good seasoning here will be sage, and that is at least a teaspoon, if not more, if not 2. Now I'm going to do this dumping and pouring thing and then taste in a minute. I'm going to sprinkle some thyme in. That is in kind of flakes. And that's about right. That may be That may be a quarter teaspoon or so. I don't have this all stirred up yet well, but the next thing to go in is pepper. And that I'm probably putting in about a teaspoon. No, a little less. That's 3/4 probably of a teaspoon. So now I will taste this, see how it is before I commit it to the casserole. And I'm thinking I've got more content here than the casserole dish will hold. So I may get to have one put by in the freezer. A whole 9x13 and one to serve tonight. And the one to serve tonight will be too much for the two guys, but I know that they'll like the leftovers. Okay, so now it's time to taste. I think I want a little more sage. And I think I want a little more marjoram. I definitely want, there, that's about double what I started with. And I definitely want salt. So the bouillon paste did not overpower this. So, whoops, my cap's open. That right there is at least a half a teaspoon. And there's another about a half. Let's mix that up and taste it. I think this is a perfect consistency for when it gets topped with the biscuits. It needs to go into the oven and get hot and bubbly. Let me see what, okay, I'm starting to run out of time here. So I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna turn the oven on. Okay, I eyeballed the amount that I've got here and thought things through and realized that I have enough to plan ahead for a friend who will need a meal in another couple weeks. So this, I'm gonna start by putting by a meal for them. And that will make my life a lot easier when it comes time to be helpful. So my first quantity is going to be put in this disposable pan because then they're not bothered with having to worry about keeping track of my dishes and returning them to me. So this is going together, going to go in the freezer and be set aside for somebody who can use a little help, a little comforting. Food is for more than nourishment, it is comfort as well. It is knowing people care. So I think that is about right for having plenty of liquid to go with the biscuits. This is going to get topped with probably 4, maybe a dozen biscuits, maybe 9. We'll see when I get the biscuits made. So there's that. I'll set that aside. And then to make sure that my next option is to decide how else I want to proceed with dishes. So this quantity here is probably perfect for this dish. If I wanted to be, I don't know, more special, I could, for my husband and son, I could make individual casseroles for them, putting the liquid in here and then 2 biscuits on top. So I'm contemplating that, doing that for them tonight. And then I can go ahead and wash this, and but I know that the liquid here is too much for just 2 of these. So then my next backup plan is to use, you can't see up here in my cupboard, but I've got some individual ramekins. So I will get, I'll get 1 or 2 of those down and use it. So yes, this thing is gonna go in the dishwasher. I could hand wash it, but it makes my life easy just to throw it in the dishwasher. So the next step is to fill up these 2 individual casseroles because that will seem a little special tonight. They will have their own casseroles with 2 biscuits on top, 1 on either end. think that is nice. You know, homemaking is about making people feel comforted and special and taken care of. It can be a very high calling, and that is how I look at it. I try to make our house a home. So it is going to be very nice tonight when these two guys sit down to dinner with me having hightailed it out for the evening. But they're going to have a pretty meal set in front of them. Chicken and biscuits. Okay, I'm going to climb up and get the ramekins. There. That's what I have to show so far for one chicken done in the Instant Pot from frozen. Next step, biscuits to go on top. Now while I'm making the biscuits, these are going to go in the oven and get hot and bubbly, because that's the way the biscuits cook best, is when I place the biscuit dough right on top of here to cook on the casseroles. Okay, I have my dry ingredients in here to stir together to make my biscuits. I'm just using a biscuit recipe out of the Better Homes and Garden cookbook. You can find a recipe online too. And biscuits have to have, well, yeah, they do have to have fat, I'm pretty sure. I could THMify my recipe if I wanted, using some flour substitutes, but that's not happening today. And if it did happen, I know that my husband would not enjoy these as much as he will if I just make regular biscuits. Now, you can use healthier flours than just plain white flour. One step would be to choose an unbleached flour instead of the standard bleached flour that you're going to find in most grocery store markets shelves. And another step would be to use something like an Eichorn flour. I'm trying to remember what kind of flour I have in my freezer. I'm not even using that. I'm just using some white flour that was in the cupboard from our son moving back home and incorporating his pantry ingredients into our pantry ingredients. And I'm trying to pare down the pantry so it doesn't feel so tight and crowded. So what I'm doing here is cutting in the butter into the biscuits with a pastry cutter. And then the next thing, oh, actually while I'm doing this, I should go ahead and sour my milk. Now I'm doing something like making buttermilk biscuits by using a soured milk. And farmers' wives would actually use real sour milk. But what I'm doing here, about 1.25 cups of milk. I am, let's see, no, 3/4 and 3/4 would be 1.5 cups. It's a different ratio if you're doing the buttermilk biscuit version. So there's 1.5 cups. And the way you sour milk is to put an acid with the milk. You can use lemon juice, or in my case, I am using raw apple cider vinegar. A couple slugs of that. So that is going to sit and sour. And the other thing that makes the buttermilk biscuit action is using baking soda in addition to baking powder. The baking soda reacts with the acid of the vinegar as leavening. So you may have seen the reaction when you put baking soda and vinegar together. It fizzes up and flows over. You know, all your kid experiments when you're young, that's usually one of them that we see. So I'm just cutting in my butter now. This is souring, and then I'll mix my liquid with my flour butter mixture here. After I don't see large pieces of butter anymore. And then I'll mix up the dough and cut it into biscuits. Then I'll be able, probably by the time I've got that done, my mixture in the oven will be close to hot. Maybe it'll be hot and bubbly, I don't know. We'll see. Just take it a step at a time. Okay, that is the consistency I want, and now it's time to add in the liquid. And what I'm looking for, I should have kept the milk out because I may add more, but I'm looking for the right texture here of dry to wet. I don't want it too dry, but I definitely don't want it too wet. It's somewhere between shaggy and wet. I don't know if you've heard that cooking term before of shaggy. This looks like it might be about right. The best way for me to know is to feel it with my hands. And hands are the best cooking tool of all. Yes, if I added more liquid to this, they would not be good biscuits. So I'm glad I got my hands in here and mixed the rest of it with my hands. It may look too dry, but I can feel that it is plenty wet. So the next thing I will do is get the stuff off my hands, leaving it behind in the bowl. I'll wash my hands, and then I will dust the counter with some flour so this doesn't stick to the counter. Actually, I'm gonna get a cutting sheet, a clean cutting sheet, and dust that and make the biscuits on the cutting sheet. Actually, let me knead this just a little bit more. Okay, I think that's good. So get it off my hands and wash my hands and get the cutting mat, dust it with flour, shape the dough, and cut the dough into biscuit shapes. Yeah. I don't know if you will ever watch this video, Vicki, but I'm using a tool that has become a favorite of mine, your bread or dough scraper that you gave me back when we were doing the sourdough stuff together. And Martha, if you ever watch this, I inaugurated your Cuisinart today. I did that to make my substitute flour mixture. So I'm not gonna run the water on that. We need to shape this dough into kind of a rectangle to be able to cut it. I want a rectangle shape because I'm going to freeform cut these instead of using a biscuit cutter. Over the years, I've decided that the biscuit cutter is not a necessary tool for making my biscuits. And so I just use a knife and cut my biscuits into squares. So I want to shape this into a rectangle, pushing and prodding it. I don't want them too thick, I don't want them too thin. It all has to be done by eyeball though. To use your intuition in some cooking. And it's okay if you screw up along the way. You learn from your mistakes. I continue to learn, and I'm 60 years old. I think when you stop learning, you stop part of living. When you stop having curiosity. Okay, we're getting close. I'm just going to keep massaging it around to get my rectangle. It's not quite the way I want it, but it's getting close enough, and I'm running out of time. Or I won't be on time for my next thing. Okay. So, I think this is about right. It doesn't have to be a perfect square. I just need to get squares out of it. Actually, yeah, if I do jam it up into a square, Might be easier for me. Okay, so this is about right here. Getting ready to switch to cutting. Feels about right. Cooking is by feel and sight and taste. Okay, I can go with that. So let's pull out a knife. In my drawer dirty. So if I do this, yeah, I'm gonna have some squares. All right, let's turn the mat. This is one of the easiest cutting jobs I've done. Usually I've had a much bigger amount. This is only a double batch of biscuits. I figured I needed it because, all right, that's a good texture. Now I need to check the mixture in the oven and see how that looks, if it's near hot and bubbly. It's not quite ready, so this will get set aside until it is ready, and in the meantime, I can put the salad together for the guys. Okay, here are the salads. It's just a bed of greens, green leafy lettuce, and some carrot shreds on here, thinly sliced cucumber, and that white onion, tiny pieces of white onion that I diced up. So I'm gonna cover these in saran and put them in the fridge for the guys to have tonight. They will use their dressing of choice off the refrigerator door. I'm not going to worry about who chooses what tonight. I think there's options that they'll both be happy with. One of the beautiful things about Trim Healthy Mama are the fuel pull salad dressing ideas that you can glean from there, both from the cookbooks, and actually probably the least expensive option to do instead of owning all the cookbooks is to get a subscription to the membership site, Trim Healthy Mama membership.com or something. You'll find it if you go to the trimhealthymama.com website, and on there they have all the recipes from all the books, and you could search for just fuel pull salad dressing recipes if you want. I think a subscription for 1 month is, no, for 3 months, I think, is $25. So you could try it out and see if you like it. We are hot and bubbly in the oven, so I'm going to show you putting the biscuits on. Well, I should say the bottom ones are definitely hot and bubbly. The top ones, the top one is much bigger, so it's taking longer to heat and get bubbly. But I think it's hot enough that I can get away with putting a biscuit on top. So that's one person's serving, probably mine. These are my guys. It's definitely going to fill them up, but I'd rather have them feel like they got plenty than not enough. So now what do I have left here for biscuits? You didn't get to see the tray. So I have 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's not exactly good, even. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, let's see what I do. Maybe I'll do 9 on here. So if I do 3, 6, 9, I can hold back a biscuit in the refrigerator for cooking tomorrow, and my husband can just have, I'll be holding back 2. Wait a minute, I gotta make them fit. Careful here. So if I'm gonna do 3, that probably is just about right, 3, 6, 9. So close to the edge, close to the edge. Dropping flour, making a mess. Don't make a mess, I hate messes. I try to clean up as I go along and not make messes. Okay, so this should take care of that family. Everybody gets a biscuit. and I get flour on my oven door. Okay, let's brush that flour off instead of going on my floor. Okay, done. Well, not done. It needs to bake now. So turn on the light so I can watch it. And the timer isn't really to tell me exactly when it's done, it's to get me to check on it. I'm gonna check it in 15 minutes and see what it looks like. Until then, I have something else to work on. So let's turn the camera off temporarily. See, I've got these unbaked biscuits now. I covered them with saran wrap. I can put them in the fridge, and then tomorrow I can bake those up hot and fresh for my husband. I've been keeping an eye on these, and I'm considering them done. I wanted to show you the hot and bubbliness from the oven. So you can see there's one of them. I guess you can't see both of them, but I'm moving them onto the island to cool. And on this top one here, this I am going to, I think I'm going to leave that a few more minutes, but I'm going to protect the biscuits. Let me close that for a minute to keep the heat in. I'm going to protect the biscuits by putting some foil on top. Because they're browning a lot. And I just want to give them a few more minutes since that's a larger quantity in there. So I'm giving it 5 more minutes, maybe 8. Going by feel, intuition. So I'm giving it 8 more minutes, and but at least that the dinner on the island here is done. Let me show you. I can pivot. There you go. So the dinner on the island is done, and I'm working on something else over there, and I'll get that done, and then I'm out of here. I realized that I've got a time gap from when my husband comes home between now and then, and it's not enough time to refrigerate these. So I think what I'm going to do is cover them with foil, and I'm still thinking it through. I may leave them on low in the toaster oven over here. Yeah, the toaster oven. So I think that's what I will do. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. So they can sit together on this cookie sheet and just be on warm. So set that for warm and stay on. And I think that will take care of that. And then this one is for myself for later, probably tomorrow's meal. So I'll just cover that and stick it in the fridge.